And he will have a talk about technology for marketing, how GDPR will shape that kind of future. Okay, so yeah, good one. Here's your clicker.
Thank you very much.
And you may choose one of the mics. It will start working in a minute.
Thank you. Yeah, confusion is definitely one of those words that is there in the marketing world. There's plenty of confusion about legitimate interest and consent, and I think it's clear from some of these emails that we've been getting, there's quite a lot of confusion as to whether I even need consent. So I'm going to try and stay out of the weeds. I think I'm not sure how that translates into Latvian. I'm going to try and stay out of some of the detail first off, though. And what I'd like to do is give you just a little bit of an insight into what we can do, particularly when we're trying to interface between DPOs, legal, and the sales and marketing team, because if ever there was an oil and water mix, it's those two if we're not careful. So what I'm just going to try and do is just give you some idea, some real-world experience. We've got about 15 years experience in this, and what I'd just like to do is sort of introduce this idea that we can start to think about how a data protection officer or a legal team and the marketing and the sales team can start working together to start trying to work out what GDPR means, but also to make sure that we maintain a really important balance. We always talk about three things when we start training organizations. We talk about the lawful, profitable, ethical use of personal data in marketing. It's a really difficult mix to get right. We have the legislation, we have the lawful piece. We can't forget that the reason we have this marketing job is because the idea we need to create revenue, whether it's a not-for-profit or for-profit, we create some revenue. And then we also have to remember the brand voice piece, which is very important, to think about what's the ethics of your organization. Trust me, when you start talking to marketing people about doing lawful, profitable, ethical marketing, it's very difficult. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just try to think about how we know the words, we've all read the words in GDPR. We know that sort of a bit like rock all the way through this is this PBD, the privacy by default and design. Great. Now how do you actually do it? When you walk into a company, when you fling the doors open, grab a cup of coffee and say, hi, I'm here to help you do GDPR, how do you actually do this stuff? So what I thought I'd do is, for the next 25 minutes, I'd try and demonstrate how you start to do some of this GDPR work, because let's face it, if you haven't already, today's the day to start actually doing it. And what we're going to think about is whether or not some technology can help us, and also whether some basic common sense people training stuff is going to be able to help us as well. So not only can technology help us, but also I need us to start thinking a little bit about how perhaps you could approach this in terms of a training exercise, teaching people what to do. If your job is a DPO, if your job is legal and compliance, how on earth are you going to get people to understand what all this stuff is all about? And here's one thing that you're going to learn pretty early on, if you haven't already learned this thing, is that you won't find all the errors, problems, or risks on your own. So when we walk into an organization and they look to me and they go, oh, Duncan, can you just fix this place for us? Can you just work out what's compliant and what's not compliant? There is absolutely no way I'm going to work out everything that is a problem in that organization. So we have to start enlisting the help of people as we begin to go down this so-called GDPR journey. So I thought I'd introduce you to something which we talk a lot about when we start training, which is how do you get particularly a bunch of sales and marketing people to go, oh yeah, GDPR, I get it. Yeah, I can see all the problems that we have with GDPR, and then let them off and run. They don't. So what we try and do when we're training organizations is we get them to think about some analogies that might help them. And the health and safety analogy is actually quite useful. So some of you will recognize this picture. I'm not sure whether it's the same in the ladies, but this is the gentleman's cloakroom downstairs. And you'll notice there's a wire stretched across the floor with some black tape on it. Now, in GDPR, we all know this concept of do no harm, damage, or distress to the data subject. Now, you see, we naturally spot the trip hazard. Somebody has gone down there with a bit of gaffer tape, and they put some tape down so that we don't fall over it. And anybody that went down there, if there was no tape on there, we would have all gone, whoa, step over that. And we would have all stepped over it. Or somebody would have gone to the conference organizer and said, oh, you want to watch that cable? Someone's going to hurt themselves down there. You see, we get the health and safety thing. There's all sorts of people in the organization that will go, okay, we need to really fix that. But here's the problem. We don't do the same thing when it comes to harm, damage, and distress when it comes to personal data. We don't spot the obvious risk. somebody doesn't come down and put the piece of black tape over the top to help us. So when you start talking to organizations about how do you really do PBD, how do you do privacy by default and by design, somebody went down there and put some black tape over it to stop us tripping over. Whereas when you introduce some new data into an organization or a new CRM system or a new data flow or a new form on your website, does anybody go, watch out, that could hurt somebody? It doesn't happen. So what we need to start doing is we need to start thinking about how we're going to engage sales and marketing people in this process when they don't naturally spot that trip hazard. It's not their natural game to sit and look at the data and go, wonder what harm, damage, and distress we could do. They're much more focused on how can we get returns on investment, how can we segment this data, how can we get better use out of the data. So the real skill when it comes to GDPR and sales and marketing is to translate it into a language that they understand so we can get them to start thinking about how to apply GDPR and how to protect the organization from risk. So when you first introduce GDPR to sales and marketing teams, of course, you have a copy of the legislation. And the first thing that they realize is that there's 226 pages, 99 articles, 173 recitals, and God forbid, 54,000 words. And that's just GDPR. So this morning, when the Deputy Data Protection Commissioner of Saxony started explaining some of the complexity that we have with 16 lender and federal and other legislation in Germany, you realize that engaging sales and marketing teams on some of these things is going to be an incredibly difficult journey. So what we have to start doing is we have to start thinking about how we can get people to understand GDPR and put it into context. I could just grab this mic. So if we're going to put this into context then, we need to start thinking about how can I get people to understand from a sales and marketing perspective about the trip hazard, the sort of thing that's going to trip them over. So this is what we do. We sit people in a room, we sit the sales and marketing team down and we say, you guys, it's not about the data protection officer, it's not about the legal department, you are going to have to work with them to work out what the risk is. So we start off by saying, look, you've all got an iPhone, you've all got a Samsung, take a look at the stuff that's on that phone, on that device. Here's where we get the problem from. So what we try and do is show people the origin of GDPR. Why have we got this thing? And that starts to engage their minds, and that helps them spot the risk, and that helps them develop processes in the organization that do GDPR. So look, I've got a fitness app on my phone, right? It's a phone. So first off, we have to think about, wait a second, it's a phone? You know, if I took the phone capability away from a phone, my 3 teenage children wouldn't notice. They don't take my calls, they don't make calls. If you buy a mobile phone contract for a teenager, what does it have to have? Okay, unlimited talk time. They just go, 5,000 free texts. What's a text? All they want is 8 petabytes of mobile data. Why is that? Because it's about the streaming economy. It's about hoovering up data. So the iPhone, the device, the tablet is the thing that's giving marketers a lot of data that we can use. Now, this stuff is dangerous stuff. So what we have to do in GDPR is teach the marketing team how to recognize the value of the data, but also the danger of the data. So we go through a couple of screens and we see, well, look, in my health app, here's all of the steps that I climb, and here's me going up the Empire State Building, and then I put my blood pressure in just to see if I could trigger any marketing. Technically, I'm dead, I think, over here. This is about 360 over 290. So I was seeing if I could trigger some marketing, because I'm very interested in why a phone has a health app on it, and whether marketers are using that data to profile me and then target messages at me. And of course, suddenly you're starting to engage the sales and marketing team, because they're going, yeah, we could use that. We could start to sell people loads of stuff based on this information. And then as you flick through the screen, you get this one. This is my sexual activity screen. Okay, that's what GDPR does for you. So what is this all about? Why has a phone got this information on it? Who's using all of this data? What is it being used for? And this is this thing about GDPR and transparency. So all of a sudden, the sales and marketing team are looking at this thing and they're beginning to realize that the genie's out of the bottle and we need to get the genie back in the bottle. There's way too much personal data out there that is being used, not just without my consent, because consent isn't the only way you can process data, but without the transparency that lets me keep control over all of this information. And then there's my Facebook wall. That's me down the bottom there, on the bottom left-hand side. So on my Facebook wall, somebody's trying to sell me an Airlight travel scooter. Okay, that's 355. That's pretty hot, that thing. I actually nearly bought it. What is going on here? You guys use custom audience, Facebook lookalike audiences. the whole ad tech world where we're starting to upload email lists of customers and go, yeah, we could hit them. Get that Facebook pixel on. We'll buy it. What is happening? Where's all this data coming from? So what we've lost is visibility of whether that thing over there was related to my blood pressure over here. I don't think it is. I think it's just a pretty straightforward demographic thing that says I'm a certain age and my parents probably need one of those things. But what problem is we don't know. So all of a sudden, the sales and marketing guys are going, oh yeah, I get it. I see, yeah, that's our segmentation. That's our profiling. That's the kind of stuff we do. And I go, yeah. Okay, so now wake up and try and understand how GDPR interfaces with all the stuff that we're doing. So what we're doing is we're engaging the sales and marketing team, not because we're against them, but because we want them to come to us as DPOs or as the legal team to come and start talking to us about what's actually happening. What technology have you got running? What deals, what partnerships, what data sharing have you actually put in place? Because when you sit at the top of a compliance tree, you don't see all of this stuff. You can't understand all of this. So you must engage the people to spot the trip hazard, step over it and go, yeah. No, that's what we do. We do that every day. We upload email lists to Facebook and we have this thing called a custom audience and we target people. We need to know about that stuff so we can start thinking about how to apply GDPR. So it doesn't matter who you work with. We work with lots of people, big and small. The most important thing is that you start to recognize that some of the challenges are really massive. These are really big challenges. I'm not even going to entertain the idea in 30 minutes of trying to explain the world of ad tech and programmatic advertising to you guys in terms of GDPR. But we do know that it's a problem, okay? Sticking our heads in the sand isn't going to solve the GDPR problem here. We know we've got consent issues, we know we've got legitimate interest issues, and we know right now that we have major problems with this ocean of data that we have about ourselves. So we can't ignore that one. But also, when you start working with companies and doing GDPR, then you also realize that there's a world other than the massive world of ad tech, which is the world of, well, can we just make sure that if somebody unsubscribes from MailChimp, the sales guys don't email them from Outlook? It really is quite banal. It's quite basic. But it's a basic error in GDPR that systematically, technically, we create an environment using marketing technology, using email technology, that is systematically incapable of complying with GDPR. We love writing that in our GDPR compliance reports. You are systematically incapable of complying with GDPR. There's a way around it, though. So that's what I wanted to introduce. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we start to fix some of these things and how the GDPR is shaping the world of technology, particularly marketing technology, not just at the sort of the high end, at the bleeding edge of advertising and programmatic that's going on the World Wide Web, but also down at the end where I've just got 50 people working for me, I've got a small marketing department, I've got a CRM system, and I've got MailChimp running or something. So what we need to do is we need to work out how to engage the team to sort these problems out. Okay, so we see the same challenges. Across multinationals, across small businesses, we see the same problems. In the larger organizations, the problems start to expand because we start losing control over what sales are doing and marketing are doing. One of the things that we have to get people to understand very early on in a GDPR compliance program is, hey, sales, you do marketing. Oh, boy, that goes down well. Hey, marketing, you do sales. That goes down just as well. Because GDPR doesn't recognize the difference between sales and marketing. So if we send an outbound message that says, hey, we got something you might be interested in, I could have a job title called sales exec or marketing exec. The GDPR sees it as the same thing. So we need to start thinking carefully about how we join up all of this consent management. You know, when people exercise their basic fundamental rights, we often create marketing systems that just simply can't cope with it. And that's the fault of the organization for not bolting together what we're trying to do with the data, the profitable use, with the lawful and the ethical use. Okay, so these are the sorts of things that the challenges that GDPR, in fact, not just GDPR, marketing opt-out's been around for a long time. So these are the sorts of challenges that we see when we try and do the lawful, profitable, ethical use of data, is all of a sudden we have to start thinking about, well, how do we manage a marketing opt-out? You know, what if somebody just phones up the front desk and goes, rah, 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 bang, I'm opting out of marketing? You know, actually what happens? So we talk to people a lot about swallowing the data or walking the data pill. So just, look, somebody's just opted out. Where's that little bit of data gone? And they say, oh yeah, we just put it onto CRM. And I go, yeah, but CRM's not connected to email. CRM's not connected to Outlook. So how are you going to deliver a core fundamental human right? Just stop marketing to me.
And of course, most organizations can't because they haven't walked the data, done their data flow mapping. So withdrawing consent, removing from profiling. You see, there's a tricky one. We go out and we spend hundreds of thousands of pounds putting in our customer journeys, putting in our Eloquas, our Marketos, our Pardots, our campaign monitors. Brilliant bits of kit that allow us to watch people online, look at their behavior, and then dynamically target them with some emails. Fantastic, great for ROI, great for revenue. But then somebody like me comes in and says, ooh, you don't want to be doing that, because that's profiling, and that person's opted out of profiling. So we really have to start thinking about how we take the legislation and put it into the real world of today, we've got an email campaign. Today, I'm setting up Pardot. I'm looking at the customer journeys, and I'm going to do some lead scoring. Marketing see that as great bit of tech, lead scoring. Whoa, check us out. They also need to be seeing the cable across the floor and making sure that they don't trip over the cable. So the idea is to get these people, particularly in sales and marketing, to put those two things together and start understanding how to deliver these rights. So we have a bit of a problem. We haven't really got, if you like, this gut feel, this sense. They're not going to read GDPR. If you've ever tried to force feed a sales and marketing team, and I do regularly, along with Chris Cumbermile at the IDM, I regularly try to force feed people GDPR, and they're just going, I'm not eating that. No way, I'm not having it. So what we have to do is we have to explain it in this language that they understand and develop this sixth sense or a gut feel where they're thinking, whoa, hang on a second, profiling. What are we doing here? Well, we're omni-channel, cross-channel tracking somebody. We're watching them on their mobile device, and then we're going to infer from the IMEI of their phone that that's the same person on our web. Yeah, that'll do. They look pretty similar. Let's put that data together and see what insight we can gather. You can see that what needs to happen is it needs to be like that Indian tracker in the old Western movies, you know, where they're crawling along and he goes, and everybody stops because the guy at the front's just a leaf has just fluttered down. And over the hill, there's like 100 cavalry soldiers. So you need that sixth sense, the idea that somebody looks at the way you're processing the data, somebody looks at the list that you just bought, somebody asks a question about the sales director's USB stick that's just landed on marketing's desk, and they go, that's a little leaf fluttering down. So they spot the risk. So as well as those rights, we're needing to spot the risks and think about how technology might help us with some of that stuff. So some of you, any of you as a Salesforce user will know that back in 2017, we had a real problem because the right to be forgotten, the right to erasure, was actually very difficult in CRM systems because there was no button. There was no way to delete the data. You archived the data. So, of course, what's happening with some of the big tech providers, some of the big CRM providers, is they're starting to speed up, they're starting to rev up, and give us, as marketers, the tools that allow us not only to increase the revenue of through our marketing, but also to comply with GDPR. So we need to start thinking about that. And if any of you are involved in CRM or talking to CRM providers, there's a massive opportunity out there, particularly for disruptor CRM organizations, to jump into the market space and go, yeah, we do CRM, we do account management, we do all that kind of stuff. And I tell you what, we've also got this thing here called Shift F5, and it deletes, does a subject access request for you. Or Shift F6, yeah, all data about this individual listed off in a report so that we can then go away and delete it or determine whether or not the right to delete exists. Boy, we could make life so much easier if we started joining those things together. So we have to think about how we deliver all of these rights. And then what we do is then say, okay, come on then, let's unpack the legislation. Let's start to think about how the technology or the marketing technology might get involved in delivering some of this basic fundamental stuff. So here's what's good fun. If you work with sales and marketing team, is actually open the legislation up and say, here you go, guys, let's do the 6 principles. Because there's this thing called, by the way, pub quiz question, how many principles in GDPR? 7. Okay, 7 principles, because at the bottom of the 6, you'll see that it's 1, A, B, C, D, E, F, 2, thou shalt be accountable for and be able to demonstrate compliance. So the accountability principle sits over the top of those 6. So one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to be able to prove that we've done all of this stuff. So when we do fair, lawful, and transparent, which is what you do in marketing quite a lot, we don't do a lot of the stuff down there that, see, the don't lose data, that's the security stuff. Okay, so we do a lot of the first principle, which is being lawful, being fair, and being transparent. So we get that stuff right. Now what we say is, okay, let's drill down into that stuff. It's like a mad game of charades. 6 principles, first principle, 3 things, first thing, 6 key tests. And then we start getting marketing to go, ooh, so we don't have to do consent. We could do legitimate interest. And of course, that's the point that's being missed with all these emails that are coming in. Lots of these emails are coming into existing customers where we have a soft opt-in anyway. We have the right to market to those people. So we're missing some of this stuff. So what we need to think about is, can the technology help us out as we begin to get the marketing and the sales teams to think about what's going on when they start to process personal data lawfully, fairly, and transparently? Okay, so okay, so here's the other one that we miss. So often people come along to GDPR training courses, or you go into a company and say, let's do GDPR, and they're all geared up, yeah, GDPR, and you go, I lied. Okay, we can't just do GDPR because, of course, we've still got the other legislation, the Directive on Privacy and Electronic Communications. So we still have DPEC sitting alongside. So what we have to remember is, if you want to comply as a marketing team, you've got to think about GDPR and all of those fundamental rights and getting your consents and your legitimate interests and your service notifications, all that stuff sorted. But you also have to remember that the Directive on Privacy and Electronic Communications is still out there. So each of us as a member state has our own national implementing legislation. In the UK, we have the Privacy Electronic Comms regs. But that's really important stuff because, hey-ho, that's where it tells us about how we do all of our email marketing, where we get to do the channel opt-outs, where we get to do the purchase soft opt-ins. Really, really important stuff that's in that existing legislation. So all this GDPR mania, we've forgotten about something that's been around since 2003, 2002, and actually that could have been very, very valuable. There's been big mistakes have been made in reconsenting some marketing databases where we know that the reconsent rate is going to be probably sub 10%. And actually, we didn't need to do it because they were all existing customers of ours. So getting the sales and marketing team to understand the way the legislation impacts on the way we're working is incredibly important. And for some, it's already too late. It's a missed opportunity. So now what we have to think about is, can we think about what this looks like in organizations? And as we begin to understand what lawful processing means, but also you see down here with the opting-ins and the opting-outs, and DPEC or your implementing legislation will tell you that all emails have to have a simple mechanism of opting out on the bottom. So we stick MailChimp up or Communicator or whatever it is. We put those devices, those email service platforms in place, and then we just accept what the company puts on the bottom for us. It just says unsubscribe. And if we're not thinking carefully about that, some people misread the unsubscribe as the Article 21, the global opt-out. Go away, don't touch my personal data for marketing. So we can actually get people opting out of a channel through perhaps contact fatigue in a channel, and yet we mistakenly read that as a global opt-out of marketing. We don't need to. We need to present rights to data subjects. We need to give them the right to globally opt out of marketing, but it doesn't need to be on the bottom of that email. We can do things in preference centers. We can do things in privacy notices. So again, teaching sales and marketing to understand the legislation can be incredibly important for protecting the value of the asset that you have, the CRM data that you've got. So we've got to do both. We've got to do GDPR and privacy electronic comms regs.
2 minutes.
Okay, and what I thought I would do is I would just introduce you very quickly to some of the things that we see going on. So here's what we see. See all the little people in the jam jar? That's our CRM system, and there you can see our email service provider over there. Then what we start to do is we ask the question, when somebody opts out of email marketing, can you join the two things together? And of course, the answer is most organizations can't. So what we're looking for now, this opportunity in marketing technology, we see these agile apps coming in, these things that sit over the top that allow you to sync data together. So there's great opportunity here to move very fast, to move very agile, to comply with GDPR by using some of this technology. And then what we see is we see Outlook introduced, right? Sales. Sales don't use CRM. Sales don't use Pardot. They use Outlook. And now we start hitting this person up through Outlook. So what happens now is that sales come along and say, don't worry, we can fix all of this. Here's our patient. We can fix the patient. And what do? They stick another CRM system in there, another beating heart of all of this data. No chance of complying now, because now you have double view of the customer, double view of all their human rights, no single view of their opt-out. So we see other products like SendBloom and Yesware being bought in by the sales teams. So watch out for this. This is where technology works against you. So this is where we see the rise of the preference center in terms of marketing technology. So we have two beating hearts. We've got all this CRM, we've got Excel spreadsheets, we've got Outlook, we've got Pardot, everything's happening. We've got no way of complying with GDPR. So now what we do is we take one of them away, or we actually say, no, let's join these things together. We join them together with a preference center. So again, more agile technology. We're not ripping out your CRM system. We're not ripping out your email service. We're putting a preference center over the top. So keep looking for these kinds of technologies. They're out there. They're able to help us. If we're not able to change our CRM or our email service provider, then we can use that. So last slide. This morning, when Chris Cumbermall, UK DMA, was talking about, is there anything else going on in the greater economy? And of course there is. So this is bigger than just marketing technology and complying with opt-outs. So what happens is our data could actually be shrinking. We might start to need to make more out of the data that we've got, simply because outbound may no longer be available to us. So this idea of thinking about the economy that's changing, thinking about as a service, and this idea of the Netflix effect. Now what we might have to do is build better trust and monetize the trust that we have. In other words, work out what data you have, and can you make more money out of the customers that trust you and trust your brand? And so that's where finally we start to see some software providers. There are many. This is one, Ebster. Ebster is starting to look and mine the data in your organization to look for those relationships so that you can still do your profiling, but you can do it on the data that you already have, the customers that you trust. So that's, if you like, how you use some marketing technology. That's how you teach your sales and marketing teams to spot the obvious risk, but also how to act in an agile way and to actually deliver compliance very early on without ripping out everything that you already have. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Duncan. A superb presentation, really. Questions? No marketing questions? Oh, I was hoping for overwhelming storm of those. Well, let's see. Marketing department just got somebody coming in from legal department, hanging out this big, monstrous paper with the name GDPR and says, you know what? Tomorrow you have to be compliant. And you come in. So what exactly are the words? How do you calm these down? So is it as simple as just ask the permission, and then you can work as you did today, or it's not that easy?
Actually, it's more complicated. It's actually about trying to put yourself in the shoes of compliance to understand what the compliance issue is. And compliance have an in-tray that's this big. So legal has an in-tray that's this deep. And you come up to them and you say, hey, I've got a GDPR problem. We've got a consent problem. And what we're trying to get people to understand is that if you understand the problems that compliance has, what we do is we create a solution for compliance without actually saying, hey, what do we do here? So marketing needs to lead the way. So marketing comes up with a solution that says, you know what, we've read the law, we've understood it. We don't want the tick box. Legal have said you have to have a tick box, it has to be, you know what, that's going to really get in the way of our customer journey. So what we're going to do is we're going to present an alternative solution. Now, it may not be compliant, but the legal will spot the risk. So in other words, marketing are trying to come up with something that's profitable and legal, and then compliance is back-checking that and saying, I like your idea, but yeah, that's not compliant. We're going to need to do it this way. So it's much more of a collaborative approach rather than trying to work legal against marketing. And if marketing understands the issues that legal has and legal understands marketing's issues, we're going to get a much better solution. Okay, that's a good note to finish this one. I have a thank you note for you, diploma, and a nice local touch. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Nice looking, thank you note. Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you one more time for great presentation. Thank you. Okay, nice applause, please.